but they made their millions that way. They made their billions through sweetheart arrangements with the government.
I was about to say, it's that whole crony monopoly model that it seems like the U.S. is more and more adopting, has been the model in Latin America.
Well, the crony capitalism in Mexico is very much akin to the crony capitalism that existed in the late 19th century during the Gilded Age in the United States.
The robber barons.
The robber barons, because the senators that they didn't buy, they rented. And with the United Citizens case saying that certain groups can give unlimited amounts of money without disclosing their donors, we run the risk of a new Gilded Age in the United States.
Well, I agree with that. Well, Professor, I've been asking a lot of the questions here, but your new book, I mean, it's got some scary characters on the front, and I've seen some of these guys. Is it drugs? Is it programming? I mean, they've got these young enforcers that are just, you know, they worship the Grim Reaper. You know, one crew I know worships a female Grim Reaper, the skinny one. The others worship a male Grim Reaper. I mean, how are they getting young people to just be ready to murder and kill and do things that we didn't really see in Mexico before? I mean, there was, you know, more of that, you know, culture of, you know, don't kill women, don't kill kids. It seems like it's just gone to hell in a handbasket. Break down your book, The Executioner's Men.
Well, the leaders are really sadistic, and they deserve to be in the lowest rungs of hell. I'll give you one brief example. They thought that some street vendors, because the Los Zetas are involved in at least 20 illegal activities, including contraband. They thought some of the street vendors on their payroll were skimming the profits. El Cuarenta, who is the #2 personality in Los Zetas, went to their boarding house with some of his thugs. He lined up these poor wretches against the wall, the street vendors, and he beat the first one to a bloody pulp with a 2x4. So he was unrecognizable as ever having been a human being. The second one incurred a worse fate because El Cuarenta took a razor-sharp butcher knife, plunged it through his thorax, and pulled out his heart. These leaders just want to be the most feared, the most brutal, the most dangerous criminal organization in the Americas. Because while they don't have a major capacity with regard to drug trafficking, they make a great deal of money from extortion, kidnapping, and even the harvesting of body parts.
Unbelievable. And again, tell us about this alliance, because I know once these wars go on, it's the most evil go to the top, because it is a survival of the most sickening and vicious. But I mean, explain to me, because what I've heard from folks who are down in Mexico is, like you said earlier, some of the other cartels have teamed up to try to exterminate the most vicious one.
Yeah, it's the Gulf Cartel and the Sinaloa Cartel who have teamed up against Los Zetas. And by and large, the Sinaloans and the Gulf Cartel leaders are businessmen. They want to import, process, store, and export drugs. They see that as good for the bottom line. Along come the Zetas with their absolutely horrific behavior, and that's bad for business. And so they want to eliminate the Zetas, all the more so because the Zetas control Nuevo Laredo. And as we talked about earlier, that's the major portal to the United States for legal and illegal commerce. And the Sinaloa cartel would love to get control of that particular city. I think then they would probably turn their back on the Gulf cartel, but they would enjoy a much more advantageous passageway to the United States.
How is the war going? Who's winning?
Well, at first the Zetas were rocked on their heels, and they retreated into southern Tamaulipas, which is the northeast shoulder of Mexico, just below Texas, into Veracruz. And it looked like it might be the end of the Zetas. But all of a sudden, the Zetas showed up in Guadalajara, which had been a Sinaloa bastion, and they even opened hostilities in Sinaloa itself, where El Chapo rules the roost. And so the Zetas can make decisions quickly. They have military discipline because they came out of the Mexican Special Forces, and again, they will use any act of violence conceivable against their foes. So they're now in 21 states. They certainly have penetrated Guatemala, where along with the Sinaloa cartel, they're the major criminal organizations. They're in all through Central America, and they have passageways so that they can get their drugs from Colombia and from Peru.
Wow. Again, I've been asking a lot of the questions here, but in the closing time we got about 5-6 minutes, Professor. Break down your book and what it covers, because I'm going to get it and read it. It looks very interesting. I want to understand this because I've studied it all the time. And as you said, the more you read, the less you know, break down the book itself and any angles of recruiting, who's dominant in different areas of the U.S., some of the things that are happening there, and then any other points that I haven't raised for you to answer.
Well, as best I could, because my wife doesn't let me even contemplate trying to interview the Zetas. And she has threatened to tattoo my Social Security number on the bottom of both my feet. So if I get into mischief, she'll be able to identify me. But I look at the organization of the Zetas. I look at their plaza chiefs. I look at their recruitment methods. I look at the dual sovereignty that occurs in some states where you have an elected government, a tax collector, a police chief, a public works director. But parallel to that elected government, you also have a plaza chief. You have the plaza chief's tax collector, whom we might call an extortionist. You have thugs who perform law enforcement functions, and occasionally some of the cartels will engage in public works. And finally, I talk about the Zetanization of Mexico, where rival cartels that used to focus on business deals, such as the Gulf Cartel and the Sinaloa Cartel, are now engaging in atrocities that were once the province of the Zetas. And so you're having El Chapo's cartel beginning to decapitate people. You find that the Gulf Cartel is now moving into extortion. They're all involved in money laundering. They're all involved now in kidnapping. And so the Zetas have set the bar high because they want to be able to go into, let's say, Alex Jones's car dealership and say, you need protection. And for $50,000 a month, we will safeguard your inventory and we won't touch a hair on the head of your employees. They've got credibility, what I call cartel cred, because you know that they won't hesitate to throw a bomb into your establishment or to take one of your family members and slice and dice them and send them back to you day by day in terms of different body parts. So they are setting the agenda for the cartels.
Looking at the Zetatization of Mexico, then, that doesn't bode well for Mexico.
It doesn't bode well. And the main challenge that the next government will have is to try to form a professional, uncorrupted, highly trained police force. And that seems like a will-o'-the-wisp, because even if you take youngsters and put them through rigorous training, look into their backgrounds deeply, pay them more, give them fancy uniforms, give them state-of-the-art weaponry. Once they go into a police precinct, they're likely to find their comandante or senior members of the force who are on the take from one or possibly two cartels. And so it is an absolute Herculean challenge worthy of Hercules to try to create an honest police force. And this is where I think the elite needs to get involved. Quickly, I spoke to a group of business people in Mexico recently, and I said to one of the gentlemen there, you've got 5 children. One will take over your business, another will be a lawyer, another an accountant, and so forth. Why don't you encourage one member of your family, one of your youngsters, to go into law enforcement? And they looked at me like I just stepped off the moon. And of course, a lot of people do that. But the thought of having one of your children in law enforcement is just abhorrent because of the terrible reputation that police have in Mexico.
Wow. Well, I've seen that here in Texas, and it's certainly been good for our economy. All of the middle class, entrepreneurial, but also then rich Mexicans are moving up here, buying businesses, spending their money. And quite frankly, it's good for in Austin, Texas, where I live. You know, nice, smart, hardworking people, businesses, companies, buying stuff, doing stuff. But what about the brain drain? I mean, I've seen that myself. Are you seeing that go on because you've got the larger image of this? I mean, is there the brain drain I see happening?
Well, I talked to a top engineer at Pemex, which is the national oil company. And I said, how's your salary? And he said, well, it's quite good by Mexican standards. And I said, are you content with your life here? And he said, if I had the chance to take a job, say with a state oil company in Norway or Brazil, I would do it in a heartbeat. That's the bad news. The good news is that there is a growing middle class, and some of whom are committed to staying in their country and trying to improve it. But at the end of the day, there's no way that an average citizen, even a university graduate, can affect incumbent office holders under the system of government that was put together by the PRI during its 71 years in office. And we're more than likely to see a new president from the PRI take office on December 1. And so you have to have a great deal of faith to be an optimist in Mexico these days.
So you're saying the elections, from your research, is not good news for Mexico?
Well, the election, the vote count was fair. That is, the vote count in Mexico is probably more transparent than in the United States because you have only one electoral roll and you have a virtually uncounterfeitable identification card. And when you go to vote, your picture is next to your name at the polling place. But as in the United States, enormous amounts of money are spent in the run-up to the election. And therefore, it is impossible for new members of the middle class, unless they join one of the political parties, to make a career in politics. And therefore, they prefer to go into business, law, accounting, teaching, and other professions, rather than to get involved with what seems to be a dirty, corrupt political regime.
Do you see these Zetization, as you call it, spreading across our border?
I don't, because